Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send us, things you're curious about, and really pull out the key insights.
Yeah, try to get to the heart of it.
Exactly. So today, we're looking at this document, and our goal really is to get a solid grasp, quickly, but, thoroughly, on these foundational bits of belief systems, how they work, how they affect us day to day.
Right, because you told us you wanted to understand this stuff without getting bogged down.
Yeah, precisely. And the document itself kicks off with this really interesting question. It asks, basically with all the suffering in the world.
Why bother studying this stuff?
Yeah, what the heck is it good for?
Mhm.
Is kind of the vibe. So let's dive in and see if we can find an answer that resonates.
Okay, let's unpack it. So this document, it really sets up a structure for looking at belief systems. Could be spiritual, could be something else. And it starts with the doctrines, which it defines as a pretty complete and coherent system of teachings.
Like a worldview.
Yeah, exactly. A worldview provides guidelines for behavior. It offers explanations for, well, everything, reality, purpose, how to reach your goals.
Goals like social, political, or spiritual ones.
All of the above, potentially.
So it's kind of the basic story we operate under.
Yeah.
And the document points out we start soaking this up basically from birth, right? Depending on our surroundings.
Absolutely. It uses that powerful example. Imagine growing up believing in a God who sustains life versus believing that death is just the end.
Two totally different starting points.
Fundamentally different doctrines, yeah. And they inevitably push your life choices in, very different directions.
Takes sense. Okay, so doctrine is the big picture. Then what?
Well, from there, we get more specific ideas. The text talks about axioms.
Axioms, okay.
Now, this word axiom, it's changed a bit over time. Historically, it meant something like self-evidently true, just obvious.
Accepted without proof.
Right. But in modern use, it's often more like an assumed starting point. A premise you accept to build an argument, even if it doesn't feel immediately obvious, intuitively.
So less obviously true and more, let's assume this is true for now.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And in spiritual context, the document says axioms are these basic fundamental truths within that system. They're the launching pad for understanding the deeper teachings.
Got it. So the doctrine's the whole story. The axiom is a core assumption inside that story. Then there are postulates.
Postulates. The text says they're similar to axioms, but maybe not quite as self-evident.
Okay.
They're fundamental statements or propositions that you assume are true as the basis for a system of thought, especially, it seems, in the spiritual realm.
So basic truths about reality or the divine, maybe. Things you accept as foundational, even if you can't, like, prove them on the spot.
Exactly. And it gives some great examples to make it clear, like Taoism.
Yeah.
A core postulate there is living in harmony with the Tao, this idea of the universe's fundamental flow. Getting in sync with that is the path to balance.
Okay, I see.
Or think about Buddhism. It starts with a huge axiom. Life involves suffering.
Right.
And then the Four Noble Truths come in as postulates. They're the fundamental understandings about why there's suffering and how it works, built on that initial axiom.
So axiom first, then postulates that explain or build on it. What comes next?
Then we get to principles. These were described as more practical. They're the norms, the guiding ideas for actual thought and behavior.
Ah, so this is where it gets really applied.
Exactly. It emphasizes the practical side, how they guide your actions, your decisions. In spiritual traditions, these principles often flow right out of the axioms and postulates.
Translating the big ideas
Into everyday guidelines, yeah.
Yeah.
Your moral compass, your existential compass, kind of.
Okay, that connects the dots. Doctrine, axiom, postulate, principle. How do they work together in practice?
Well, the Buddhist example is helpful again. Let's say you really grasped that second noble truth, the postulate, that suffering comes from desire or craving. That understanding isn't just intellectual. It can actually lead you to, spot unhealthy attachment patterns in your own life and maybe start to change them.
So it moves from an idea to actual self-awareness in action.
Precisely. It becomes practical.
The document mentions this interesting phrase, you sow sin possessividad, using without possessiveness.
Yeah, I like that too. It suggests that if you truly internalize the idea that clinging causes pain because things always change, right? You can develop this attitude.
So it's not about like becoming a monk and renouncing everything.
Not necessarily. It's more about relating to things, even material comforts, with more freedom.
Right.
less identification. So you're not constantly anxious about losing them or them breaking.
You can enjoy your phone without needing the absolute latest model or freaking out if it gets scratched.
Exactly. You use it, appreciate it, but your core happiness isn't tied to it in that rigid way. It reduces anxiety.
That makes a lot of sense, practically.
So the big takeaway here, I think, is that these concepts, doctrine, axiom, postulate, principle, they're not just abstract terms for philosophers.
No, they're structural.
Right. They structure our actual human experience. They provide the framework we use to make sense of life, find meaning, and orient ourselves toward what we value.
They really shape how we think and live.
Absolutely. The document stresses their power to deeply reorganize our experience, both thought and lived reality. Changing how you see things changes how you are in things.
Which brings us right back to that critical question the author asks near the end.
The one about dogmatism.
Yeah. How do we avoid dogmatism and indoctrination? The kind that, as the text says, limits people and causes so much suffering in the world.
It's a tough one, a real paradox, isn't it?
Totally. You see doctrine centered on love.
Being used historically and even now for imposition, domination, persecution, starting wars.
It's baffling. How can the same core doctrine lead to such different outcomes? You have, on one hand, rigid interpretations causing immense conflict.
And on the other hand, within that same tradition, you find mystics or figures radiating love and a kind of liberating spiritual force.
So the document asks, what does it depend on?
And the answer it gives is, well, it's us.
Us. How so?
It depends on us as humans, what and how we understand these ideas, how we teach them, how we apply them, how we actually practice and internalize the principles.
And crucially,
Crucially, the coherence, the match or lack thereof between what we say we believe and how we actually live.
that feels right. It's not just the ideas themselves, but how we embody them.
Exactly. The document briefly mentions that the source organization, CAF, pays special attention to how its teachings are transmitted, suggesting that's key to avoiding dogmatism, but it says that's maybe for another discussion.
Interesting. Leaves us with something to think about, though.
Definitely. Understanding these foundational pieces, it's valuable not just for, academic understanding, but for understanding ourselves and how we navigate the world.
So the final thought for you, listening, might be that question itself. How do you avoid rigid thinking within your own framework, whatever it is?
Yeah, maybe reflecting on your own core beliefs, your principles, and asking how much alignment is there between those beliefs and your actual day-to-day actions?
It's a really important question. Hopefully this quick dive gave you a useful way to start thinking about it.